What's up, guys? Welcome back to Blondes Building Equity. Today is a really strange episode because our first episode without Jessica. It is her birthday. We're going to be celebrating tonight, and she's also fixing a major problem at one of our properties in Huntington. So she took one for the team today, but we have a really special guest, someone that I think a lot of you guys are going to relate to because he has kept his W-2 job and now he has $5 million in real estate. So he's working a normal job, raising a family, and was able to build that $5 million in real estate. A lot of people think that's impossible. So welcome, Finance Cowboy. Also say your real name, but this is what everybody knows you as, right?
Exactly. What's up? Yeah. So Finance Cowboy on social media, real name JD Sustar. Either one works. Unfortunately, I don't have blonde hair or I don't have any hair. So the listeners will have to forgive me. I do have some red in the beard. I don't know where that comes from. Yeah, so that's been our story. We've been able to build this real estate portfolio while I was working a full-time job and raising a family. My wife stays at home, so been a one-income family. I've had a good income. It's scaled over the years, but yeah, I just try to inspire folks. It's like you don't have to do real estate full-time to be successful in it by any means.
Wow. And so, yeah, that's super inspiring because I know, it is a lot of people jump in full time and I have a lot of respect for that, but it also is really scary. Like real estate is a very cash intensive business. And a lot of times you're tied up and you have to support yourself as well. And so I think for a lot of people, we always say, especially in times like these and, we're going into a hard recession, I'm like, keep your job, figure out a way that you can master the real estate before you go quit your job or do any of those things because you always need more money to fund more deals. So kind of tell us the beginning story, how it all started, how you got into real estate.
For sure. Yeah, I think you're spot on. The W-2 job or whether you work for yourself, whatever job, can 100% be the superpower because doing real estate full time isn't all it's cracked up to be. It's a lot easier to invest in real estate passively than it is to do it full time. But my story comes when I graduated college in 2013 with a ton of debt. So over $60,000 in student loan debt. And then I live in South Carolina, so you got to have a jacked up truck. Then I decided to get married, so I financed a wedding ring. And next thing you know, we were over $100,000 in debt, and I was like 22 years old. And so what we did for the next 5 years, really from 13 to 18, was pay off debt. Not everybody loves him, but we listened to Dave Ramsey at the time. I obviously don't agree with everything he says because I have a lot of mortgages out on real estate now. But at the time, it was great for us being young 22-year-olds, newly married, to get our finances in order. And so I always say, for 5 years, we didn't buy real estate because people will look at social media or hear me on podcasts and they'll think, oh, it must be nice. You just went and bought real estate. No, I was in the trenches for 5 years just paying off debt. Like, that's not that fun. I made it as competitive as possible. But you don't see, you are moving forward, but it almost feels like you're wading through quicksand, And so we get done paying off the debt. So it's around 2018. But before then, throughout those years that we didn't really have any money and we had bad debt, my best friend had gotten into real estate right out of college. And he started by doing a little bit of commercial real estate, but then he became a bird dog, which is just a crazy word for saying he went and found good deals. And then they had a buyer's list. So they would find good deals. And then instead of wholesaling them, they would be their agent. And so you could call it a form of wholesaling, but they would buy the property and represent them. And they would get their fees and that helped with their bonuses and all at their company. And so the whole time he's doing that, he's telling me all about his deals, but not as a mentorship, like on purpose, just as best friends talking every night. We didn't have kids. We just, talk on the phone. I was living in Florida at the time. And so I started learning a lot from him, started listening to Bigger Pockets podcasts, reading books. And so the time comes, 2018, I finally got my stuff cleaned up and I'm like, all right, I got an emergency fund in place. Bad debt's gone. I need to put my money somewhere or it's just going to disappear. And so it was either stocks, bonds, crypto, or real estate. And I was very excited about real estate. It made people rich for centuries, made my best friend wealthy. You look at my father-in-law and he bought land throughout the years and has a couple rentals and it worked out well for him. So I was like, we're going all into real estate. And my best friend actually pulled me along. Gaston, the one who was telling me his stories all those years, was like, hey, the time is now. You're just wasting time by not buying these properties. You could be unbelievably wealthy because he became a multimillionaire by 27 by buying rentals. He's like, it's time to go. And so he helped me, through that entire first deal, landed that first one, wanted to back out, was so scared. Can remember that feeling that maybe some of your listeners are feeling where they're scared to take that plunge. But I did that first one, and then it's off to the races once you get that first one done.
Wow. So your strategy since the beginning in 2018 has always been buy and hold. Is that the only thing that you've kind of dabbled in? Is it single family buy and hold? Are you doing multifamily?
My bread and butter is single family buy and hold. Now we've flipped a number of homes, plenty of homes, but it goes back to I have a job. And so for me, not needing capital right away, I don't need capital to live, means I can hold these properties. If I didn't have a job and I needed extra cash, then I would need to flip properties to be
Yeah.
able to live. And there's been times where we flip properties because we ended up buying it and, we had to put a little more into it than we thought, or maybe we needed cash for another project. And so we, ended up selling it. But 90% of the time we're buying single family homes in B to C class neighborhoods and hold on to them for as long as we can.
Yeah, super smart. And that's the thing. We are flippers, and we flip for the active income. And so many times we're like, all of our mentors are like, if you just held on to everything, you're going to be so much more wealthy. And we're like, I completely agree. And so we're trying to navigate that. But especially for my business partner, it's like at least can do social media almost full time. But it's really difficult to manage both. So that's my next question for you. But we are really trying to navigate, like, you just can't buy and hold if you have no plan to survive. So it's super difficult. You hear all these people all the time on social media like, oh no, just buy and hold, you're gonna be super rich and go real estate investing full time. But for a lot of people, that's not really realistic, because once you buy something, your cash is tied up, and what next? And then I always want to buy new things. And no matter how much money I've made in my previous business, that gets tied up, and then I'm like broke again. I'm always, liquid broke, and you need that constant cash flow.
Yep, for sure. It can be a tough balancing act. It can definitely be a tough balancing act.
And so how do you manage kind of both having that full-time job and still being able to be really present in building them? Because 5 million in since 2018, so 5 years is a lot. So that's really inspiring to a lot of people. So kind of what was your strategy to make it work with your family and your job?
Great question. So as far as management goes, I ended up giving all my properties to a management company.
Yeah.
And that has been the best thing that I have ever done. I pay 10% for them to manage the properties, but I spend less than an hour a week on real estate unless I'm going and looking at properties.
Right.
It has made being able to do that. Everybody's in a different scenario. There's some of you who may need to pull that extra 10% out, and you can manage them yourselves efficiently. I've managed my long-term rentals efficiently. I've managed my short-term rentals efficiently. So there are ways to do it, but I'm in a position, because I've stuck with my job, to where I said, you know what, I will sacrifice at this point in time the 10% to not have to think at all about it, to not
Yeah.
even worry about it at all. And the beautiful thing about my management company is they will manage the rehabs for you as well. And so if I find a fixer upper, I buy fixer uppers every time. So I don't end up flipping. And everybody thinks you sell them, if they call them a fixer upper, because of TV shows. But all of mine are distressed properties that we make nice. And I have the management companies who will go in and they have the relationships with contractors, and they'll manage that for me now. Now, it's not always been that way, and it's still not always that way. There's times where they get backed up and I have to run my own crews, and that's a whole different story. But really getting, deciding what I wanted my life to look like. Anytime I do something, because I'm, growing on social media, coaching people now. And anytime you do anything new, whether it be real estate, a brand, a business, I think you have to sit down and say, what do I want my life to look like first?
Yeah.
And then try to build the systems around it. And that may mean less revenue, but it means more peace of mind and more freedom. And that's what we've decided to do.
Wow, I really love this. I think you're the first person we've actually had on who is doing a full-time job as well as doing real estate. So I think that's honestly something we've all really needed to hear right now, because it makes you just believe, like, is it not normal that I need to go get a job and make this happen? Because they're like, oh, just BRRRR out, refi out, use that same money. And I'm like, totally, I get that we're going to use that same money to buy a new property, but what money am I going to use to live? Where is that money? So, have you been able to actually effectively refi once you rehab the property? You obviously buy distressed. Are you always burring out and then using that for the next one, or do you always keep a little bit in?
When I first started, I used all of my own money. Okay.
Right.
So I just bought, and I wish I wouldn't have, but I learned, very quickly. But the first two I bought, I used my own money to buy and rehab. And so, I bought the first two at both around $70,000. So I'm all in at 15,000 down, and then called another 15 or 20 in for rehab. So
Yeah.
after the first two I did in a matter of, I don't know, 5, 6 months, I was all in at $50,000, and I look and I'm like, oh crap, I'm out of money,
Yeah.
and I could have been okay with that and said, that's fine. I'll just buy 2 rentals a year. I'll save up and I'll do it again. And it still would have made me pretty darn wealthy in the long run. But man, you probably know, once you get a taste of, what is on the other side, this is a scenario where the grass is actually greener. I was like, all right, I got to be able to do more of this. And I don't have any money left. So how am I going to do it? And so that's when I started implementing the BRRRR strategy.
Right.
And, it's not black and white. There's different ways I would do it. But essentially, the BRRRR strategy is I would, get private funding for the entire purchase price, the entire rehab, and I rehab it out, get a tenant in place, refinance. So now that it's fixed up, I would go and get a new appraisal. Bank loans me 80% of that new appraised value. They write me a check for that. I take that check, put it in my bank account, pay the private lender back what I owe them and any fees, and then I keep the rest. And that private
How
lender's happy because they just,
difficult
and then I
How difficult was it for you? Obviously, when you have a private lender, say you're going to offer them a 10% return, or what typically would you offer them? How is there enough room on that deal where you could refi not only their money out, but the like return on investment for the investor? How have you been able to
Mhm.
make that happen?
Yes, I'll pay him around a 10% interest fee, and that's amortized over 30 years. So I think some people have the wrong idea that it's like, hey, an investor loans you 150 grand, you automatically have to pay him 10%, which is 15,000. Like that's not how it works. It's 150,000 amortized over 30 years. So it's like on a loan schedule, but it's due in 1 year. So it's on
Mhm.
a 365-day note, but you pay it like it's on a 30-year note. It's just all due at the end of year one. And so I would just make those interest only payments. So I didn't have to pay
Right.
them principal and interest. So I'm paying them interest only payments. So let's say on a what $100,000 loan, is that, I don't even know what the math is, 800 and something bucks a month, that I would pay them, maybe a little bit less. I don't know off the top of my head, but you just have to set aside, when you're underwriting, you have to set aside what is known as your holding cost. So you got to be able to get
Yeah.
properties at a big enough undervalued deal to make them work. And there's a whole formula that we use for that to make sure that we're buying it right, based off how much money we're going to have to put in and what it's going to be worth once we get it done being rehabbed, and then what the bank's going to give us on the new appraisal. And so
Right.
if you do all that right on the front end, then there's plenty of love left. So for example, I'll give you a real life example. I bought a house in September or October of last year for 90,000. Okay. I came up with that purchase price by doing what's called, my little method is I do ARV, after repair value, times 80%, 75%, somewhere in that ballpark, minus rehab, tells you your purchase price. And so I
Hmm.
knew this home was going to be worth somewhere around 170,000. Okay, so then I multiplied that by 80%. And that's what, I don't know what that is off the top of my head, somewhere around 136,000, 130,000. And then I knew rehab was going to be around 30,000. So I knew I needed to get this home somewhere around $100,000 for this deal
Right.
to make sense as a BRRRR. Well, I was able to get it at 90 because I negotiated off of the inspection report. So I got under contract at 100. I looked at the inspection report. There was more wrong with the property. So I negotiated down another 10. So we get it at 90. I'm feeling good. So then my projections were 30,000 in rehab. Well, we ended up doing 32,000 in rehab. So we're all in on this property at $122,000, right? So we're all in. It's fixed up, tenants in place. Now I go to a bank, I get it reappraised. And the bank says, well, this is worth $170,000. So we will now write you a check for 80% of that, which was 136,000. They wrote me a check for that, and then I paid off the private lender, okay, which we were all in with him at 122 plus his fees, right? So just say I'm all in at 128 with him, whatever that number is. And then I had, 136 that I had taken out. So I still had 8,000 left over that I was able to put into my pocket.
Wow, amazing. And so with each property, what is kind of your goal as far as cash flow? Because I think a lot of people watching it that I hear, they just expect so much in cash flow. Maybe they're doing one single family and they think they're going to make $1,000, $2,000 a month passively. And we've just heard so different, and I want people to be really realistic. I think something that really got us in the beginning of our career in this was not being realistic. And I think people just have to start getting realistic in the beginning. Like, this is a long-term journey. This is hard and it's going to be worth it. But so on each house, what is kind of your goal passively on like the cash flow side? $300 a month, something around there?
I would say that my properties cash flow anywhere from break even to $300 a month.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't necessarily have a set goal that I have to make. And again, okay, part of this is because my personal finances are in order. I don't have consumer
Mhm.
debt. I have my emergency fund. I have money invested, and I have money coming in from my job. So in my mind, even if I get this asset that's worth $200,000, okay, and I had to put zero of my money in, and I'm cash flowing $100 a month, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing because now I own this $200,000 asset that has a $140,000 note on it. So I already have $60,000 in equity right off the bat. I bought it without any of my own money, so my cash on cash returns are infinite. Okay,
Yeah.
now I have a little bit of cash flow coming in after, and when I say cash flow, that's what's left over after everything. So I've already accounted for 10 to 15% in maintenance. I've already accounted for vacancies. I've already accounted for taxes, for insurance, for all of that. So anything left over is just gravy. And so while I love to have more cash flow, and there are some deals that I buy specifically for cash flow in the short-term rental space, okay, which is a totally different topic. But when I'm buying long-term rentals, I am okay with just acquiring assets and building equity because I'm not
Hmm.
using any of my own money. And what I have learned, okay, what I've learned over 5 years is if you do this, you get wealthy. That's what happens is you get wealthy. It's not just paper money anymore. If people say, well, net worth's just paper money. Well, it is until you access that capital. It is until you look and you have a $2 million net worth, which means you have all this equity in these homes while rents are going up, and you can actually access this equity pretty much at any time. Once you have more than 80% in a home, and you can pull that out tax free over and over and over again, or you can sell in 1031 exchange, blah, blah, blah. So anyways, I know it's a soapbox of mine, but people preach cash flow so much, but think
Yeah.
about it, guys. Realistically, are you going to pass on a house because it only gives you $100 a month in cash flow, but not $300 a month in cash flow? Just buy less at the grocery store for a month, and it's a wash. Like, who cares? You still own this $200,000 asset without any of your own money. So that's my take on it.
Wow. Yeah. And so many people have different takes. And that's why I think it's so important for people to find their style, what works for them. But that's what's so beautiful about real estate. We have options. You can be investing for cash flow, you can be investing for equity builds, but you also just talked about short term rentals. So you've dabbled in that market. How's that going? Are you making good cash flow off those?
Yeah, short-term rental market, it's you have to be a lot pickier today in which market you choose than you had to be in 2018, 2019, and even the beginning of 2020. But I am looking at a couple different deals right now. So they're still making sense that are going to cash flow 1,500 plus a month.
Wow.
So when I'm looking at an Airbnb, because most of the time I'm having to sink my money in it, okay, it's hard to BRRRR an Airbnb. Okay, it's not impossible, but it's harder to do because normally they're in good vacation areas and the houses are taken care of. So I'll do what's called a second home loan, and I'll put 10% down. And so, these houses, you may be buying them at, 200,000, you may be buying them at $800,000. But what I'm looking at here is a good cash on cash return, which is
Hmm.
obviously going to correlate with cash flow. And so when I'm looking at Airbnbs, I normally don't take any less than a 20% cash on cash return. Okay.
Wow.
And so that that cash flow could be different depending on the price of the home. But for example, I have a home in Seabrook Island, which is just south of Charleston. It's in Charleston County in Charleston, South Carolina, and it cash flows $850 a month, and I bought it for $187,000. And I have almost $600 in HOA fees a month because it's a private community. So that would be almost right at $1,500. But I just like going down there, so I bought it. Probably not the best investment, but it still cash flows $850 with all those HOAs, and so there's a lot of opportunity for cash flow in the Airbnb space. It's just a lot more volatile and definitely a lot more work.
Definitely a lot more work. Right now, we have two of our properties on Airbnb, and it's just been an absolute headache dealing with the tenants, but we're managing ourselves, and we're never going to do that again. But we're really navigating that. But yeah, so what market are you in? Because where we're at, we're obviously in Los Angeles, and so every deal we do is 1 million, 2 million. So it makes it really, really tough. I keep trying to convince my business partner, Jess, that we need to move because there's no room for error. You know, if you think you're going to refi out X amount and then the appraisal comes back X amount, we're talking about $100,000 difference, not 10, you know? And so it's just such a heavier game to be in, and it's such a competitive space in Los Angeles. So what market are you in? Do you like your market?
Yeah, you guys are in a tough market, man. LA's tough. And if you're going to make real estate work there, you're probably either going to have to flip or you're going to have to do Airbnb. So you are picking the right strategies there for sure. It's hard to find some long-term rentals in LA, but we are in Seabrook market. So it's Charleston, South Carolina. Again, it's getting harder to find good deals. So for example, the first property I bought there was a 2-bed, 2-bath, about 1,000 square foot. I bought it for 187. 2 years later, I bought another one across the street. Looks exactly the same, pretty much, for 287. Okay, and then I turned around and sold it a year later for 460. A guy called me and wanted to buy it, and I was like, okay, I'll take $180,000 profit and 365 days, and it was right past the year long mark, so I didn't have to pay short term capital gains. I was capped on long term. So what's interesting now is homes like the one I bought are now like 500 grand, and a home like in another part of the island that was a 3-bed, 2-bath and was only 400 when I started buying. Now they're worth 800. And so that market's getting a little harder, and that's where I'm, especially with the HOAs, and you got a capital fee you got to buy in, and so you have to get a little more picky on where you're going. So I still look there. Right now, I'm looking in like the Panhandle of Florida area, the Orlando area, Ellijay, Georgia, Helen, Georgia. I used to combine the Smoky Mountains. You can't buy in the Smokies anymore. So I'm looking in these like vacation destination spots in the Southeast. But what I'm learning is like instead of what are known as the hot spots, the areas maybe 20 miles away from the hot spots are starting to rise up, which is interesting. So if you look around Panama City, everybody used to go to Panama City. Well, now you got these little smaller islands, maybe 20, 30, 40 miles away. You're starting to see some boom there, and it looked like the Panama City. Well, maybe not Panama City. It's been big for a while, but the little towns around Panama City, it looks like they did, years before they blew up. And so, the biggest thing is just what are the rules and regulations? And do they, like short-term rentals, and do they already have those, regulations in place? You don't want to buy in a place where they don't have them in place yet, because you could end up getting boxed out. And it's hard to buy in a place where they don't like short-term rentals at all, because then you won't make any profit.
That's how we are here. I mean, it's just not only is it super difficult, but the city is just, they do not care for short-term rental. Then all of the neighbors hate it. So the regulations are super tight. You're in LA where we're at, it has to be 30 days or more. And then in Huntington, where we have another one, Huntington Beach, the permitting process to get it on Airbnb was just so lengthy, so insane. And we're still going through that process, and it's just wasted 6 months of our time, So we're like, they just make it so difficult. So wherever you guys are looking for a short-term rental, make sure that they're very investor friendly, short-term rental friendly. I think in general, California, Oregon, Washington, states like these are not investor friendly, whether you're doing long-term or short term. So you really have to think about that. And that's why when I'm starting to build my now buy and hold portfolio, I'm really just I've looked a lot in Florida. We've talked about Nashville, just some of these areas where we can, have a little bit more room there and have a little bit more support in general. Like you can't really cash flow at all on a single family home as an investment in California or in Los Angeles. It's super, super hard. And then you have so much, you have to go raise 400,000 from an investor instead of raising, 80,000 for a down payment. And that is such a different ask from an investor. So wherever you guys are at in the world, if you thought maybe it's not as an exciting place as California, I'm telling you, California is not all it's cut out to be in real estate investing. It is not the
Yeah.
spot to be. I mean, people make it work though, for sure. So I got to figure out how they're doing it.
Yeah, I mean, you can make stuff work, but like you said, it just gets hard to find
Yeah.
stuff where you can just go across the country or halfway across the country. You go anywhere, I always say anywhere in the Midwest or Southeast, and what all you have to do is this. And I promise you, it's this simple to picking an area. Then you got to build a team out in that area and find an actual neighborhood.
Yeah.
But if you just go to the Midwest or Southeast and find little micro cities, like right outside big cities, you will find good rental areas. So what I mean by that is like Chattanooga, Tennessee, right? It's not a big city, but it's growing. You go on the outskirts of Chattanooga, easy to buy rentals. Greenville, South Carolina, Des Moines, Iowa, Fort Wayne, Indiana. I mean, you can literally take a dart, put a map down, pick the Midwest and Southeast, throw it, and where you end up is probably going to be a decent place. Not always, but you guys get the point.
Yeah. And so this has been a big topic lately, probably for the last 6 months. How are you feeling about the economy? What's kind of your plan moving forward? Are you buckling down? Are you still buying?
So I'm still buying. When I started buying real estate, I buy under what's called commercial loans or DSCR loans or portfolio
Hmm.
loans, which are loans that are lent out to LLCs. It doesn't affect your debt to income ratio. And so when I started buying in 2018, those loans were at 5.8%. Okay, the last one I did at the end of last year was 6.25. If I were to buy today, probably going to be at 6.75. So it's really, it's a point higher than what it was when I first started. We just all got really, really spoiled when rates were really low. That's not necessarily normal. I don't think they've been that low in decades. The
Yeah.
problem right now that rookie or people who have been in real estate long enough are running into is they're looking at homes that are on the market and they still have a high price, and
Yeah.
so they're saying, wow, this high price with these high interests, I can't make the numbers work. And you can't. And so you're going to have to do a couple things. You're either going to have to find off market deals, okay, people who need to sell for whatever reason, or you're going to have to look at on market deals and realize, okay, it's not worth what they're asking. So I told you about that $90,000 house that I bought at the end of last year. It was listed at 130. I ended up getting it at 90. Another one I closed on in December was listed at 140 and I got it at 105. And so you have to go in and figure out, you got to solve problems. Why are these people selling? And
Mm.
figure out why they're selling, and then put a presentation. I say presentation, it does not need to be anything extravagant. Just show, hey, I'm an investor. Here's my numbers, right? This is what my calculator looks like. This is what I have to buy it at to make it work for you guys. I can close in 7 to 10 days. Let me know if you want to do it. And so that's how I'm finding deals. As far as the market, I'm not necessarily concerned about the stability of the real estate market because there is such little supply. If you look at the numbers, most everywhere, in some places, I'm sure it's over, the people have overbuilt or whatever, but in most places, the supply is really low. And these interest rates are manufactured right now to bring down inflation. And at some point, they're going to come down. So if we can mine deals, mine these gems out now and make numbers work at 6, 7, 8% rates, which you can, I'm doing it currently, then just imagine when rates go back down. If you're at 8%, when it goes down to 6, do you understand how much that's going to boost your cash flow? Like ridiculous amounts. Or if it drops back down to 5.5. So if you got a cash flow in property or property that's breaking even now, when you can refinance out into those lower rates, your cash flow is going to boom through the ceiling.
Right.
And so nobody knows in the short term. The market's just volatile in general right now. Obviously, that bank went down,
Yeah.
another bank went down. I think another bank's going down. So it's like it's a funky time. But even in 08, 09, I think in a lot of like the rural areas where you would really buy long-term rentals, most of them went down 5 to 10%. And if you can cover it, if you're cash flowing or breaking even or can cover it out of your own expenses, you're fine. You're going to be fine. So, I'm still buying.
Wow, that's really good to hear. And so I want to know kind of in the last 5 years, what has been your biggest mistake that you've made?
The biggest mistake, number one, is not buying more. That's the biggest mistake everybody has. But I'll give you the listeners a more applicable mistake. When I first started, I was buying buy and hold rentals, and I was fixing them up too nice. And that's one of the
Mm,
things you tend to do when you first start. My wife and I did it. We thought we were chipping Joanna Gaines. We made this place look amazing, and then I realized like I put way too much money in this. It's going to get beat up. There's no reason to do that. So if you're flipping a home, you want to make it a little bit nicer than the area. If you're buying a rental, I always make sure the bones are working. So I fix plumbing, HVAC, leaks. Like my people live in good places, but they're not getting real hardwood floors. They're not getting tile. They're not getting the expensive vanities, right? I'm going to go buy a $150 sink from Home Depot or Lowe's. I'm not, doing a tiled shower. I'm going to do an insert shower. So just things like that. And I went from spending $25,000 in rehabs, to sometimes getting out of there in $6,000, which is a little
oh
harder
my
now.
God.
Materials and supplies have gone up. So maybe I'm at 10 to 12 now, but you really, really got to pay attention to what you're doing to rentals.
Wow, that's so how are you able to do that with HVAC electrical? I mean, obviously maybe California prices are just through the roof, but even when we're using subs and not GCs, I mean, just if you want to replace the HVAC, you're looking at 10 grand alone.
Yeah, if you're having to replace an HVAC, then yeah, you're going to get hammered. Most of the time we're
Yeah.
not having to replace them. It's going in and, patching up, the ductwork underneath the house or whatever. If we have to replace it, then I'm going to do my best to knock that off the price, right? Knock that off the purchase
Yeah.
price. And then you'll have to replace it. But I like replacing those things up front. I really do like replacing those capital things up front if they are at the point where they need to be replaced, because you got to remember, I'm using private money. And so if I
Yeah.
can get some of those big ticket items out of the way on the front end and still refi out and pay all of that back, now I've just updated a lot of these things without using my own money, which is great. So I don't have to, go in and pay for it out of cash flow later or pay for it out of my own pocket later. So it just depends. Again, a lot of times we're trying to keep the costs as low as possible, and a lot of these HVACs are, in great condition. But that's a great point. If something's in bad condition, you got to know, hey, this has to be fixed. That stuff gets really, really expensive.
That's how I feel like you can make the cosmetic stuff pretty inexpensive, if you need to replace the floor. But the second you're going into the bones, we just did a total down to the studs renovation, and it just constantly adding every day. You're like, oh, the roof, this, and you're like, it's just so expensive, especially in California. All of our renovations, but they have to be high end. We're selling at the 2 million mark, or around 250 to 300,000 for the renovation. So
Mm.
it gets pretty tough. But so I heard your two biggest
Yeah.
mistakes were you're not buying enough and you're over renovating on rentals.
Yep, and I will say this too, because you make a good point. If you get into a project and for whatever reason you did not look at everything correctly, you didn't look at the inspection report, your contractor missed something, whatever, and you get into a project and you've spent more than you want, you can turn around and flip that. I
Mhm.
haven't run into one of those scenarios, but I know plenty of investor friends who they've bought properties and it was going to be buy and holds, and then they started gutting stuff down, like you said, and they realized, wow, I want to get this money back because I'm putting more in than I realized. You can turn around, flip it, pull that
Yeah.
capital out, and go buy another project.
Yeah, and I think that's why you have to look at every deal when you're running it and know multiple exit strategies. Like, okay, can I short term rental this? Can I have a long term rental? Can I flip this if so? When something hits a fan, that's what happened with one of our flips. It was we weren't selling. The market here really took a turn, and we were sitting on the market. Interest payments were crazy, and we were able, luckily, to turn it into an Airbnb, and it ended up working out. But if we didn't have that option, it would have taken us under, and we would have definitely probably gone bankrupt because our interest payments are
Yeah.
16,000 a month. So every house we're carrying, 100,000 a month in interest payments. It's crazy.
Yeah, these girls are playing in the big leagues, folks. That's big money over there in California. I love it.
But it's so intense when you're first getting started. It gets really, really scary.
I know that's when you
Where'd you
start
go?
playing with those numbers. I'm looking at buying a high end short term rental right now in the Panhandle of Florida, and man, just making myself, because I think to this day the most expensive property I bought other than my personal home is 287,000, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm
Wow.
paying so much, and now I'm looking at seven, eight, $900,000 Airbnbs, and you guys are probably getting more used to it. And I'm back at that place like, oh man, I don't know if I can make myself do it, even though the returns are there. The returns are great, but it's just like putting that many eggs in that basket scares me.
Right. And I think especially right now with the market, I think like you had so much equity to lean on in the past 3 years that you could have made a few more mistakes, especially in flipping. But now where the market's at, there's no room for error. And so it gets really, really scary if you, and the high market gets hit first. Those lower end, the middle, those are necessity homes, 3 bedroom, 3 bath. But these high end homes are the first ones to really, really get hit. And so we're definitely really, really feeling it. We're versus some people that we network with are like, oh, my market hasn't been affected. So I think it really, really does matter. So now moving forward, you said you didn't buy enough before. You're still working your other job, right?
Yep, 100%.
Okay. So what's your plan now? Like, are you on like a 2 houses a month, or what is your goal for this upcoming year?
My goal for this year is 10 houses. So
Okay.
that's what I'm shooting for. To add 10 houses. I think ideally, I would like for 1 to 2 of those to be Airbnb,
Mm.
and then 8 or 9 of those to be long-term rentals. And so that's my goal I've set. If I can do that, that'll put me in a good position. But again, it's just I'm not going to do it just to hit a number and buy bad deals along the way. We're going to underwrite correctly and make sure that we're getting into this, um, you know, every property the right way.
Right. Well, this has been so informative and so, so helpful. Where can anybody find you online? I know you said you had a coaching program. So did you just start teaching? Where can they find you on that? Where they can find you on Instagram?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Finance Cowboy. You can find me on YouTube at Finance Cowboy, Twitter at Finance Cowboy, TikTok it's at the Finance Cowboy. Somebody had hijacked Finance Cowboy before I got it.
Oh,
So, anyways, those are the best places to find me, and I do offer coaching. It's something that I absolutely love. I have my best friend in my corner when I started. And so now I get to do that for other people. We got a ton of students absolutely crushing it. So we only open a couple times a year. We're actually closed right now, but people can get on the wait list. So just get on any social media platform and DM me the word WIN, WIN, and we can get you added to the wait list for when we launch later this spring.
awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for listening to Blondes Building Equity. This was an amazing episode where we got to figure out that you can have a W-2 job and invest into real estate. So make sure you guys will link his information below if you want to check him out, and make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and catch us next week on Blondes Building Equity.